You know what's wild? I spent years thinking I struggled with self-worth because something was broken in me, that I needed to hustle harder, prove more, shrink myself in some places and overcompensate in others just to feel enough. But here's the truth, and it hit me like a punch in the gut the first time I really saw it in the research. Self-worth isn't something you earn, it's something you remember. And most of us didn't forget it by accident. We were taught to forget. Taught that worth comes with conditions, achievement, perfection, likability, productivity. But that's not the truth. That's just the training. And unlearning that, that's the real work. And it's not easy, but it's possible. Let's walk through 5 things I've learned, not just through research, but through watching people actually live braver, more wholehearted lives. We've been conditioned to believe that worth is tied to external validators, grades, weight, income, likes, titles. But the truth is, those are performance metrics, not worth metrics. Your worth is inherent, not transactional. And I wish I could tell you I came to that realization quickly, but the truth is I had to unlearn a lot of things that had kept me chasing approval for most of my life. See, when we're young, we start picking up these quiet but powerful messages, some spoken, some implied, that say, you'll be loved if you behave well. You'll be noticed when you achieve. Or you'll be enough as soon as you look, act, or produce like this. And we internalize those messages, not because we're weak, but because we're wired to belong. Belonging is survival for us. So we become masters at shape-shifting, becoming who we think we need to be in order to earn our place. Now, here's where the trouble begins. We start confusing approval with belonging and achievement with worthiness. They are not the same. But we start living as if they are. I've seen this play out in the data again and again, people tying their self-worth to how much they can achieve, how flawlessly they can perform, or how well they can meet other people's expectations. It's like we've attached our value to a scoreboard that someone else is constantly updating, and no matter how many points we think we're putting on the board, it never feels like enough. Here's what the research says. When people tie their self-worth to external outcomes, whether it's their job performance, physical appearance, or academic success, they are significantly more likely to experience anxiety, depression, eating disorders, and burnout. Because here's the trap. If your worth is attached to what you do, then the moment you fail or even pause, you feel like you're nothing. If you tie your value to how productive you are, then rest feels like failure. If you base your worth on being liked, then rejection feels like annihilation. It's exhausting, it's heartbreaking, and it's common. But the truth, the deep soul level truth is this: your worth is not something you hustle for. It's something you carry. You came into this world already worthy. Nothing you do can increase it, and nothing you've done can decrease it. Now, I know how hard it is to let go of those external markers because we've spent so long chasing them. They gave us a sense of control, maybe even a sense of identity, but what they rarely gave us was peace. And that's the difference between performing worth and living in it. When we start to shift from I am worthy because I achieved to I am worthy, full stop, something changes. We show up differently in our relationships, in our work, in our lives. We start setting boundaries instead of burning out. We say no without guilt. We rest without shame. And we stop handing our self-worth over to people or systems that were never meant to define it. This shift doesn't happen overnight. It's slow, tender work. It's about recognizing the lies we believed and choosing truth even when it feels unfamiliar. It's about showing up with compassion for ourselves in moments when our default would be self-criticism. It's about trading the measuring stick for a mirror and learning to see ourselves with clarity and care. Because at the end of the day, worth isn't something you prove, it's something you own. And once you own it, everything else starts to change. Shame isn't just feeling bad, it's feeling unworthy of love and belonging. It whispers, you're not good enough, and then who do you think you are? The antidote to shame isn't perfection, it's empathy. The moment we speak shame out loud in safe spaces, it loses power. I want to say this clearly, shame is universal. If you're breathing, you felt it. And if you've ever struggled with self-worth, I promise you, shame is lurking somewhere in the background. It's like emotional quicksand. It doesn't always look dramatic on the surface, but it pulls you down fast and keeps you stuck. And here's the sneaky part. Shame is really good at disguise. It doesn't always show up with that name tag. It often sounds like, I'm such an idiot. I'll never get it right. They'll see through me. I'm too much. I'm not enough. See how quiet it is, how private? Shame thrives in secrecy. It grows in silence. It feeds on isolation. The more we avoid it, the more power it gains. And when left unchecked, it doesn't just affect how we feel. It actually rewires how we see ourselves. Let me be clear. Guilt is different. Guilt says I did something bad. Shame says I am bad. Guilt can be productive. It motivates change. But shame corrodes the belief that we can change. It says, why even try? In over 2 decades of research, I've interviewed thousands of people about shame. What I found is this: the people who are most resilient, not perfect, but resilient, are the ones who have developed shame resilience. That doesn't mean they don't experience shame. It means they know what it is, they recognize its voice, and they've learned how to respond rather than react. And that response almost always begins with empathy, because shame cannot survive empathy. The moment you speak your shame to someone who responds with compassion, it starts to dissolve. That's not just poetic, it's neurological. When we receive empathy, our nervous system calms down. Our brains stop firing in the threat centers. Our bodies stop bracing for rejection. That's why connection is so powerful. But here's the problem. When we feel shame, the last thing we want to do is talk about it. It feels like the most dangerous thing in the world. Because shame tells us if anyone really knew this part of you, they'd leave. But the irony, the cruel twist, is that the more we hide, the more we feel alone, and the more we believe the shame story is true. So we need to flip that script. We need to learn to name it. This is shame. This is what it feels like. We need to practice reaching out. Can I tell you something that's hard for me to say? We need to surround ourselves with people who respond with, I've been there too. I still see you. I'm not going anywhere. That's empathy. And that's what breaks shame. But it starts with us. It starts with our willingness to recognize shame in the moment, to speak it out loud, to stop letting it run the show from the shadows. And that takes courage. Raw, shaky, everyday courage. If you've been carrying shame silently, I want you to hear this. You are not alone. You are not broken. The story shame has been telling you is not the truth. You are worthy of love and belonging, not when you're perfect, not when you're healed, but right now in all your mess and beauty. And the moment we start telling that truth to ourselves and to one another is the moment shame starts to lose its grip. When we don't feel worthy, we put on armor. We numb, hustle, people please, pretend. But here's the paradox. The more we armor up, the more disconnected we feel. And the more disconnected we feel, the more unworthy we believe we are. Breaking the cycle starts with courage, even tiny, shaky courage. Let's talk about armor, not the kind you wear into battle, but the emotional kind we carry every single day. The kind that looks like perfectionism, like sarcasm, like overachieving or undersharing. It's the stuff we put on to protect ourselves from the possibility of being seen and rejected. Because when we feel like we're not enough, the instinct isn't to lean in, it's to cover up. We hide behind a polished image. We overwork to prove our value. We shut down emotionally to stay safe. And if we're being honest, most of us have gotten really good at it. So good that sometimes we forget we're even wearing armor. I used to think the goal was to be bulletproof, but now I know the goal is to be whole. And the problem with armor is, yes, it keeps the hurt out, but it also keeps you in. It blocks connection. It numbs joy. It walls off the very parts of us that are most capable of being loved. The data backs this up. In my research, I've seen that people who rely heavily on emotional armor report higher levels of loneliness, exhaustion, and burnout. Why? Because performing all the time is draining, keeping up the mask is exhausting, and living in fear of being found out steals all the oxygen from our relationships. The irony is painful. We put on armor to be accepted, but it's the armor itself that keeps us feeling isolated. One of the most common forms of armor I see is perfectionism. Now, perfectionism isn't about high standards. It's about the belief that if I look perfect, I can avoid shame, judgment, and blame. It's a shield, but it's a heavy one, and it keeps us from ever feeling fully seen because we're only showing the curated version of ourselves. Or maybe your armor looks like people-pleasing, saying yes when you want to say no, agreeing just to keep the peace, dimming your light so no one feels uncomfortable. And the problem is, every time we abandon ourselves to please others, we reinforce the message that our real self isn't worthy of love. Sometimes the armor is cynicism or humor used to deflect. Sometimes it's withdrawing completely, emotionally ghosting when things get too vulnerable. Sometimes it's working so hard, so fast that we never stop long enough to ask, what am I running from? But here's the good news. The armor isn't who we are. It's what we picked up to survive. And if we learned it, we can unlearn it. And that unlearning starts with the smallest acts of courage. It looks like saying, I'm struggling when you'd rather pretend everything's fine. It looks like sharing your opinion in a room where you're afraid it won't land. It looks like resting when your inner critic is yelling lazy. It looks like letting someone see the real you, not the edited highlight reel version. One moment of courage at a time, we can begin to loosen the straps on that armor. And what we discover when we do is this: we don't need to be invulnerable to be safe. We just need to be real to feel connected. Because the people who truly love us, who truly see us, aren't drawn to our perfection. They're drawn to our presence, our humanness, our truth. And that kind of connection, it doesn't just heal, it transforms. And so we begin gently with awareness. We notice the armor, we name it. And then when we're ready, we start choosing something braver, something softer, something more honest, because worthiness isn't found behind the armor. It's found when we dare to take it off. Self-compassion isn't self-indulgence, it's self-preservation. The research is clear. People who practice self-compassion are more resilient, more motivated, and less afraid of failure. And yet, most of us talk to ourselves in ways we never talk to someone we love. You cannot shame yourself into worthiness, but you can grow into it with kindness. If I could hand every person just one tool for healing their self-worth, it would be self-compassion. Not in the fluffy, feel-good, bubble bath and affirmations kind of way. I'm talking about the gritty, awkward, emotionally honest practice of treating yourself like you're actually a human being, not a machine, not a problem to fix, not a failure to hide. The truth is, most of us are much kinder to our friends than we are to ourselves. We'll comfort someone else in their pain, reassure them when they mess up, hold space for their imperfections. But when it's us, we're brutal. Our inner dialogue can be cutting, unforgiving, and relentless. Think about the last time you made a mistake. Something small, even. Maybe you missed a deadline or said the wrong thing in a conversation. What did that voice in your head sound like? Did it say, it's okay, you're human, you'll figure it out? Or did it say something more like, what is wrong with you? Why can't you get it together? That voice, that harsh, shaming inner critic is not making you better. It's making you scared. It's shrinking you. It's chipping away at your sense of worth. Here's what the research shows. Self-compassion isn't a weakness. It's not a way of letting yourself off the hook. In fact, people who practice self-compassion are more accountable, not less. They're more likely to take responsibility, to apologize, to grow, and to try again. Why? Because when failure doesn't equal worthlessness, it becomes a place you can actually learn from. When you're not afraid of being torn down by your own voice, you're more willing to take risks, you're more creative, you're more present. You stop living in constant fear of getting it wrong and start living in a way that's grounded in self-trust. One of the myths that keeps us from practicing self-compassion is this idea that being hard on ourselves is necessary to succeed. That shame is a motivator. But let me be clear, shame is not a tool for transformation. It's a weapon. And when we use it against ourselves, we don't rise, we retreat, we hide, we collapse under the weight of not enough. Self-compassion, on the other hand, is how we build the capacity to hold pain and still move forward. It sounds like that was hard and I'm allowed to feel it. I'm not the only one who struggles with this. I made a mistake, but I'm not a mistake. And those aren't just nice sounding lines. They're rooted in the core components of self-compassion: mindfulness, common humanity, and kindness. Mindfulness helps us notice when we're in pain without getting swept away by it. Common humanity reminds us that we're not alone in our struggles. And kindness invites us to treat ourselves the way we'd treat someone we love. Here's the deeper truth. Worthiness and self-compassion are inseparable. You cannot feel worthy while treating yourself like you're unworthy. It just doesn't work. So when the inner critic pipes up, and it will, you have a choice. You can let it run the show, or you can pause, breathe, and say something different. You can meet that voice with curiosity instead of judgment. You can choose softness instead of shame. And maybe that doesn't come naturally at first. Maybe it feels awkward or even silly. That's okay. New patterns always feel unfamiliar at the start, but with practice, real intentional practice, self-compassion becomes a new way of being. And when that shift happens, it doesn't just change how you talk to yourself. It changes how you show up in the world. Because when you believe you're worthy of your own kindness, you stop settling for spaces that require you to abandon it. The foundation of real self-worth is built in safe, authentic connection. We are wired for belonging, not fitting in, but true belonging. Where we don't have to hustle, hide, or shrink, we heal in community. And that healing begins when we stop trying to do it all alone. Here's something I've learned again and again, both in the research and in my own life. We don't heal our shame, self-doubt, or feelings of unworthiness in isolation. We may do some of the inner work alone, reflection, journaling, confronting those old stories, but the real transformation happens when we're seen, fully seen, and still loved, because we're not meant to do this work solo. We weren't built that way. From a biological standpoint, humans are wired for connection. Our brains literally light up when we experience empathy, trust, and vulnerability. And yet, when we're struggling with self-worth, our first instinct is often to pull away. We retreat. We put on the mask. We tell ourselves, I'll show up when I'm better. Or worse, I don't want to be a burden. That belief that we're too messy, too broken, or too much is exactly what keeps us stuck. It convinces us that isolation is safer. But what we're actually doing is reinforcing the lie that we have to earn belonging, that we have to be fixed before we're worthy of being loved. The research paints a different picture. Over and over, what I found is that people who have a strong sense of worthiness are not people who have perfect lives. They're not the most accomplished or the most confident. They're the ones who believe they're worthy of connection. And because they believe it, they allow themselves to seek it. They show up in relationships with honesty. They ask for help. They let themselves be vulnerable. Not everywhere, not with everyone, but with the people who've earned the right to hear their story. Because that's the thing about connection, it has to be built on trust. I'm not talking about dumping your rawest truth on someone who hasn't shown up for you. I'm talking about those relationships where mutual care, presence, and respect have created a container strong enough to hold what's hard. And when we find that kind of space, whether it's with a friend, a therapist, a support group, or even just one safe person, something shifts. We begin to internalize a different message, one that says, you don't have to prove anything to be loved here, one that says, you're allowed to be exactly as you are. That's where self-worth begins to settle in. Not as a performance, but as a knowing. Now, I know some of us didn't grow up with models of this kind of connection. Maybe the people who were supposed to love you didn't know how. Maybe you've been burned by vulnerability before. Maybe trusting others feels dangerous because it's never gone well. That's real. That's valid. And it makes this kind of work even braver. But I want you to know that healing, trustworthy connection is possible, and it's worth seeking. Because as long as we're trying to white knuckle our way through shame and self-doubt on our own, we're denying ourselves the very medicine that could help us feel whole. I've seen it happen again and again. Someone walks into a group, heart racing, palms sweating, convinced they're the only one who feels the way they do. And then they speak, tentatively, shakily, maybe even tearfully, and someone across the room nods or says, me too. And in that moment, shame loses its power. Not because it's gone forever, but because it's not alone anymore. That's the power of connection. It doesn't fix everything, but it changes everything. It gives us perspective. It offers us grace. It reminds us that our pain doesn't make us unlovable. It makes us human. So if you're struggling with self-worth, don't wait until you feel ready to reach out. Don't wait until you feel perfect to let yourself be known. Start small. Find someone who feels safe. Be honest. Let yourself be seen. And when that voice in your head tells you to hide, remind yourself you were never meant to do this alone. Because the truth is, the path to self-worth isn't just inward, it's also outward in the way we connect, the way we're held, and the way we hold space for others. So here's what I want you to remember. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are not too much. And you are absolutely unequivocally enough. Your struggle with self-worth is not a flaw in your character. It's a reflection of the messages you've received, the stories you've carried, the armor you've worn just to make it through. But you don't have to live from those stories anymore. Not now, not going forward. Because now you know the truth that worthiness isn't something you hustle for. It's something you already have. That shame only thrives in silence. But you can speak it out loud. That the armor you built to protect yourself can be gently laid down. That kindness toward yourself isn't weakness, it's courage in action. And that connection, real, safe, loving connection, isn't a luxury, it's your birthright. The work of reclaiming your worth isn't easy, it's not neat or linear, but it's possible, it's powerful, and most importantly, it's yours. No one else can walk this road for you, but you also don't have to walk it alone. So be gentle with yourself, speak kindly, take off the armor, one piece at a time. And when you feel the old voices creeping back in, pause and choose differently. Choose compassion, choose courage, choose to show up. Because the world doesn't need a perfect version of you. It needs the real you. The whole, honest, brave, messy, beautiful you. And you are absolutely worth showing up for. Good luck out there. You've got this. And you are so deeply worthy of everything good coming your way.